Morbius, the latest addition to the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters, is a superhero film directed by Daniel Espinosa and based on the Marvel Comics character of the same name. The movie tells the story of Dr. Michael Morbius, a biochemist who is suffering from a rare blood disease and tries to cure himself with an experimental treatment that instead transforms him into a living vampire. Morbius stars Jared Leto as the titular character, Adria Arjona as Martine Bancroft, Matt Smith as Loxias Crown, and Tyrese Gibson as Agent Simon Stroud. The first thing that stands out in Morbius is the lack of a coherent story. The film's plot is a mess, full of holes and inconsistencies, and it fails to establish a clear direction. The script jumps from one subplot to another, trying to balance Morbius's origin story, his struggle with his new powers and hunger, the conflict with the villain, and the introduction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe (MCU). The result is a disjointed film that fails to provide a satisfying payoff to any of these elements. One of the biggest problems with Morbius is its protagonist. Morbius is a poorly developed character who lacks depth and motivation. He starts as a brilliant scientist who is driven by his desire to save his life, but he quickly becomes a bloodthirsty monster who shows no remorse or guilt for his actions. The film tries to justify his behavior by presenting him as a victim of his own experiment, but this doesn't excuse his erratic and violent behavior. Furthermore, Morbius is inconsistent in his actions and decisions, which makes him an unreliable and unsympathetic hero. The film's supporting characters are equally unimpressive. Adria Arjona's Martine Bancroft is a stereotypical love interest who is given little to do except to be a damsel in distress. Matt Smith's Loxias Crown is a one-dimensional villain who is motivated by greed and power, and who is completely forgettable. Tyrese Gibson's Agent Stroud is the only character who shows some potential, but he is underutilized and becomes a plot device to bring Morbius into the MCU. The visual effects in Morbius are mediocre at best. The film relies heavily on computer-generated imagery, CGI, to create the world and the creatures, but it fails to deliver anything that is memorable or imaginative. The action sequences are poorly choreographed and lack excitement. And the film's climax is a generic and uninspired fight between Morbius and Crown. The soundtrack is equally uninspired, featuring a generic and forgettable score that adds nothing to the film. Finally, Morbius's attempts to connect to the MCU are misguided and forced. The film tries to introduce the character of Michael Morbius into the larger MCU by including references to other Marvel characters and events, but it fails to do so in a meaningful way. The references are forced and awkward, and they detract from the film's own story and world building. Moreover, Morbius's attempts to set up future sequels or spin-offs are poorly executed and feel like a cheap marketing ploy. In conclusion, Morbius is a disappointing film that fails to deliver on its promise as a superhero movie. The film is plagued by a lack of coherence, poorly developed characters, mediocre visual effects, and uninspired direction. If I would give Morbius a score, I would give it a soft 2.